A great place to work, we've known this for a long time, is not defined by amazing perks and great slogans. It is defined by how people experience their workplace every single day, whether they feel trusted or not, whether they feel included, whether they're proud of what they do, whether they're confident in the organization, where we're going. And when those elements are strong, something really, really powerful happens. We see the engagement rise in employees, innovation accelerates, retention improves, of course, and customers notice. And the organizations who have those really strong, great work cultures that are built on trust perform better than the average organizations consistently. We've been tracking this for over 30 years with a lot of organizations. And so, whether you're leading change, whether you're shaping culture, whether you're looking for evidence to support your people centered decision, today's conversation is meant to give you a clear lens into what actually drives great workplaces and the results that they create. So I'm joined today with my colleague Alison Grenier, who's head of culture and research at Great Place to Work. Al, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, your experience at Great Place to Work?
Sure. Thank you, Melanie, and welcome everyone. It's my honor to be here to, talk about not just what the work we do, but why it matters. And I think that's the important takeaway from today's session. So yeah, thank you. I've been with Great Place to Work for more than 15 years, and I've seen a lot of evolution over that time. But there's a few things that have been steadfast, and that is trust as the foundation for business success. So happy to be with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's true, through changing times and all the different challenges, there are some constants, right? And we're going to be talking about those today. So, in terms of the Great Place to Work effect, we're just going to take a few seconds to introduce you to it. What creates this Great Place to Work effect? First of all, it starts with leaderships. Leaders, I put S's anywhere with leaderships. Leaders shape the experience. And that experience is what shapes the culture, and that culture drives our performance. And so, in organizations, when leaders demonstrate the great leadership behaviors that we want to see, Ethan, could you move to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. When leaders really create that high trust environment by listening to their people, by sharing information openly, by developing and supporting their people, by inspiring others by how they show up and by their passion for what we do, by thanking people for their efforts, for their hard work, by sharing in the rewards, celebrating our accomplishment, hiring the great people, and more importantly, perhaps than everything else, everything's important, but demonstrating care for our people, making them feel that they are important because they absolutely are important, right? Pretty much any organization in the world can probably create the same tools and the same things that you do to do the same thing. Your main differentiator is your people, right? The people who operate those tools, the people who deliver to your service. So when we make these people feel cared for, that's when we create a great experience for our employees. And when we do all these great things as leaders, that builds trust. That creates pride in what we do. That leaves room for camaraderie and people enjoying each other's company. And that also creates an environment that is for all, where everyone has that same great experience. And when employees experience that, so when they really experience it in their day to day, they feel these things, right? They're not words on a wall, or they really are something they experience, then that becomes our culture, right? And when we have trust, when we have pride, when we have camaraderie, when everyone feels that, that's when we start having that really great collaboration, the innovation, the agility to adapt to all these changes that we're forced to deal with these days. That's when we uncover new opportunities and we have that sense of belonging and well-being, right? And well-being continues to be incredibly important. For those of you in Quebec, just as a side note, and those of you in Canada, this will be interesting for you as well. There's a new updated laws in terms of safety and security in Canada, where any organ in Canada, in Quebec, sorry, where every organization that has more than 20 employees is now mandated, absolutely has to track employee well-being the same way we track safety and security. It is really, really important. So when employees are doing all those things and they are feeling well, and we have the collaboration, that great place culture, that's when we get the wonderful performance. That's when we see profitability increase, productivity, efficiency. We see customer satisfaction scores increase, the social impact that we're able to have because we're doing many things. We're doing them in a positive way. We see that market resilience. We see that very well with data, the market resilience of great companies when there are some external factors, the talent acquisition, the retention, all of those things. Those happen more organically when we are able to create that great workplace. And I do realize, Gillian, I see your hand raised. I forgot to let people know in the intro, and Allison reminded me to do this just before we got online, to please put your questions in the Q&A so that we can see them. If you use the chat, there's too much going on in the chat generally in these sessions, so we might miss it. If you can put your questions in the Q&A for us, we will be happy to answer these as we go along. And we do want your questions. So, Gillian, I do want to hear from you. Please type your question for us. I really appreciate the interaction. So now that we've talked about Great Place to Work effect, very, very high level, I'm going to go back to Allison and we're going to start a conversation about it. But before we jump in to our conversation, I want to hear a little bit from you. So we're going to use a quick poll. What I want to understand from the people on this call today, and thank you for joining us in such large numbers, is how strong do you feel your workplace culture is today? So think about workplace culture as how people experience the workplace every single day. And we're just going to give people a few seconds to answer that. And then we're going to start our in-depth conversation with Allison around the Great Place to Work effect. Wonderful. I love that we can see. I don't know if you're seeing this on your end as participants. As a facilitator for this session, I'm seeing the results come in real time, and so it's very, very interesting. So I guess I don't see numbers changing very much anymore, so we'll leave just a couple last seconds for people to put in their answers. And so what we're seeing from the people who answered here today is we've got a good uh, repartition, using a French word here. We've got people in all categories, a fair amount. Our strongest one is somewhat strong. We've got some needs improvements, some very strong. We're going to talk about that again later in our session. So for now, let's jump into our conversation, Allison. What does the Great Place to Work effect mean in practical terms for a business? I talked about it at a very high level, but very practically, what does it mean?
Uh, that's the $1 million question. So in practical terms, like if I was in front of a group of senior leaders and I want to really explain what we're talking about, I would probably begin by saying the great place to work effect or creating a great place to work. This is not a feel good concept. Okay, so this is not just something we do because we're trying to be nice to our employees or get them to like us. The great place to work effect is really about the measurable boost in performance that organizations experience when they intentionally build a high trust culture. And this can show up in a whole bunch of different ways. It could be revenue growth, it could be productivity, it could be community engagement, recruitment, retention, customer service. There's so many different ways we can measure, and that's going to vary from client to client. Some clients are focused on growth, others are focused on innovation, customer service, what have you. The one that I've seen coming up most often recently is agility. And so it seems like almost every client I talk to these days is looking to become more agile, to be quicker in adapting to change. And this is a sign of the times, really. So the point here is, regardless of what your performance goals are, when you intentionally focus on building a high trust culture, this is going to help you get there.
That makes sense. That to me, certainly, hopefully to people on the line as well. So we've talked about trust already. You mentioned it. Why is trust the foundation of being successful in being agile and all those things?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I've been in the Great Place to Work network for more than 15 years. And during that time, I've seen this word trust kind of go in and out of vogue. right? And so people talk about trust, and then they think trust isn't important, and now we're talking about trust again. In fact, if you Google it, everybody is talking about workplace trust. So there seems to be a universal recognition that trust is important. But I like to break it down into, it's really all about human relationships at work. So we're all human beings, we all have relationships with our leaders. That's the most important trust building relationship, by the way, at work. Everyone has a relationship with their leader, which fosters trust. We also have a relationship with the work we do. In our terminology, we call that pride, but that's a different kind of relationship. And then, of course, the relationship we have with our colleagues, we call that camaraderie. So when we think about trust, really all we're talking about is how we develop those relationships that we're having at work. And, simply put, when employees trust their leaders, they're going to move faster, they're going to take smart risks, they're going to collaborate more effectively with each other, they're going to know what's expected of them. And so this is where our research comes in, showing that trust fuels a number of business outcomes, including productivity, which is really the bedrock of market resilience. And this is why we find organizations with the highest levels of trust are consistently outperforming their peers, even in the not so good times, right? So the high waters float all boats, everyone's doing well when the market's strong. But what is the most interesting part of our data is when there is a dip in the market, everyone dips. But when you have high trust in place, you really accelerate out of that. And I mean, we saw that very clearly during the pandemic, and we see it time and time again, that it's not just about the good times, it's about the difficult times as well.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to interject with a comment here because you mentioned the pandemic. Certainly, what was interesting to me during the pandemic is that we saw that organizations who already had very high trust levels were able to weather the storm easier than organizations who didn't. But we also saw in Canada about 60% of organizations use the opportunity of the challenges we were facing to increase trust with their employees, right, during that period. So
Yeah.
not only did they were they set up for success, but they were able to use adversity and deal with it in a way that created even more trust, right? And so that's super inspiring to me. What Thinking back to the business outcomes, which of the outcomes do you find improves first when trust increases, right? Because we're talking now about what happens when you have high trust, but a lot of people are on the journey that they're not there. So what can they expect as they're working towards building that trust?
Yeah. So one of the things I love about my job, you also have this privilege, is we get to follow organizations through their cultural journey and learn a bit about their business along the way. And so when we're having conversations year after year for 5 years in a row, it gives us a lot of great anecdotal evidence of how building trust is improving their workplace, making it easier for them to grow, innovate, and so on. But I would say usually it's not a quick thing. So people think, oh, I improved my trust index and boom, next year I'm going to grow, double. It doesn't work like that. So usually it's more of a slow, steady evolution that we see as trust increases. The one that I have seen increase quickest is what we call productivity. People are willing to give extra to get the job done. That's one of the metrics that customers often see improving first, and then things gain momentum, and then it takes off from there. The other thing that's very quick to impact is customer service. So think about your employees, and they're in front of clients, they're in front of your customers all day long. If they're a bit grumpy at work, how do you think that comes across in terms of customer service? So when your employees are happier, they're going to deliver better customer service. And so we definitely see that as well. Um, my personal observation is that all of these early stages of building trust need to be anchored in communication. And so if an organization is struggling with a number of elements, I will always suggest they focus on the communication first piece first. because then, you know, what happens when communication improves? People know what's expected of them. They know what they need to be doing. They don't need to second guess leadership. They don't need to sort of figure out how to navigate bottlenecks in the organization. Things are very clear. And so I think it's you. I don't know. I've heard you say this, Mel, a number of times. Clear is kind, right? And
That
so that
comes from
kind of
Brene
clarity,
Brown.
Brene Brown, right? So that is so true. Clear is kind because it gets all the stuff out of the way so people can do their jobs. They can focus on doing their jobs. So
One other thing that a lot of people have heard me say often is that in terms of communication, when people do not have the full story, as humans, what do? We fill in the blanks ourselves, right?
yeah,
And then research shows, and this isn't from Great Place to Work research, but certainly a lot of research that I've seen, and I've experienced this every day myself, and I see this in people. Unless trust is through the roof, when we're filling in those blanks, making up the rest of the story, 99% of us will tend to make a negative assumption before a positive assumption. And so, certainly in terms of building trust, being told a message and not having people making negative assumptions that we don't care or don't know what we're doing, critically important, wouldn't you say?
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Wonderful. So let's hear from our participants once again. Before we go into our next topic, I want to give people a chance to share again on their poll because we do want to learn from you as well and see what you're experiencing. So, what would you say is your biggest barrier to building trust in your organization? So our options are inconsistent leadership, poor communication or transparency, lack of follow through on feedback, limited recognition, competing priorities, lack of time. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would want to pick multiples here. Tell us what's your most important one right now. What's the biggest one at this moment for you in terms of your barriers? Yeah. We're seeing things move a little bit. We're going to give you a few seconds here to answer that. Wonderful. We're not seeing a lot of movement anymore. So here, what we are seeing certainly is for those people who did answer, we see inconsistent leadership behaviors being pretty high, lack of follow through on feedback as well, and the communication seem to be our top areas that are coming out. And that's in line with, of course, what we see that the reason why we pick those options is because those are the things we see most often in organizations, right? Because they are really big barriers. And so, Allison, I want to go back to the role of leadership because all of these things that those five options that we just gave you are all leader-led things, if you will. So, can you talk to us a bit more about leadership behaviors and how they play into driving trust, culture, and performance?
So, you know, as you said earlier in today's session, great workplaces begin with great leaders. It's impossible to have a great place to work without great leaders, full stop. And so, a lot of the work we do is focused around coaching leaders on how they show up for their teams, whether they're sitting at the executive table, whether they're a mid level leader, or whether they're a frontline leader managing large teams of individual contributors. Each of those leadership levels has a key role to play. So, if I think about sort of the senior most level of the organization, obviously it's important that you have buy-in from this group on why culture is important, the strategic value of creating a culture. People are looking to those senior leaders to walk the talk. They're looking for their actions to match the words. They're looking to be inspired, in fact. But it doesn't stop there. So you could have the most dedicated executive team in the world. But if your mid level and especially, I would say, your frontline leaders are not also living that high trust leadership or developing high trust leadership, then it's going to end there. It doesn't go anywhere. So it needs to start at the top, but it also needs to cascade all the way down. And what happens though in many organizations that we've seen is maybe someone's a great programmer or a great developer. And what happens is they get promoted into a leadership role. because they're good at their job. And maybe being a leader is not their goal. Maybe it's not an area where they feel they have a lot of great strengths, and then we don't develop them. So that sort of crux there, that frontline leader, it's so important that we're really nurturing not just the technical skills of that person, but also the leadership skills as well. We've done a ton of research on this, as you know, Mel. And so we have identified 9 high trust leadership behaviors that we see in every single high trust workplace we work with. Some are stronger than others, of course, but it really begins with inspiring, as you talked about already, having that senior leadership inspire, clear communication, speaking, but also I would argue more important than the speaking part is the listening part, right?
Yeah.
So the communication and the inspiring is important, but also the things that leaders do to encourage people to bring their best to work, like showing recognition, like helping people develop their careers and grow their careers. And then finally, leaders play a key role in fostering team spirit. How are they celebrating within their team? Are they hiring people not just for culture fit, but for culture add? Are they making sure that that team celebrates together and so on? So it's a pretty tall order when you think about what we expect people to do, maintaining all the strategy focus and the metrics, but also at the same time. But the big message from us is if you can master even some of these behaviors as a frontline leader. So, for instance, if you can remember to say thank you when you see something you want someone to do again, you are making your job easier, not harder. And so I would encourage every leader, regardless of your level, to think about your own behavior as a leader and to think about developing 1 or 2 new habits that will actually make your job easier. Because what happens is when leaders show up exhibiting those high trust leadership behaviors, your employees show up as well, bringing their best.
Yeah. Our behaviors drive their behaviors, right?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes. And vice
Absolutely.
versa sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It's like, not that employees are children, but it's like dealing with children, right? Understand that I'm not saying employees are like children, but I'm saying it's a two-way street in terms of
Two-way
how we
street.
impact and influence each other, right? And it is a very tall order, especially for someone who's new to leadership, right? It can be jarring when you're top performer as an individual contributor, and then you get into a leadership role, and all of a sudden you have to learn these new skills. Some of them, some people will have a few that come naturally, but all of us have areas in there where it doesn't come to us naturally. So for our next poll, I'd like to hear from our audience. If you could improve overall 1 leadership behavior across your organization over the next quarter, what would that be? We have listening, clear communication, inspiring others, demonstrating care, and following through on commitments. I'll give you a few seconds for this one. See things coming through. Certainly communication is coming in strong. Yeah. Oh, and I think I influenced your answers because it came in even stronger after I said that. Definitely, yeah. Communicating clearly is coming in strong. Demonstrating care is another one. Absolutely. All of these things are really important. But your answers really highlight what Allison was saying about communication, perhaps being the most important foundational skills to really build that trust, right? And so, Allison, how can leaders begin building trust quickly, right? So if people who are on this call who want to think about, okay, how do I help my leadership team to really start making an impact soon with this kind of thing? What would you recommend?
So, this is where our clients really rely on our expertise, our knowledge, our data to help steer them. If anyone on the line has ever done the Great Place to Work survey, you'll know that, there's 60 statements, there's a bunch of demographic. It's a lot, right? It's a lot to know what to digest. So our role as consultants is to help you understand your data and prioritize what are the one or two things you can focus on in the coming year that's going to kind of give you the biggest bang for your buck. And so this is what we do every day for our clients, help them prioritize. And so, if I were going to help clients prioritize, as you already heard me say, I think communication is at the top of the list. But if you're really looking for a low hanging fruit, listening may have a bigger impact than speaking. So, what do I mean by that? So, all of us have our own communication style. Some of us are more effective than others. Some of us know we need to improve. Some of us are good at one type of communication. Maybe the systems are weak or whatever, right? So communication is like a big bucket, and most companies could improve in that area. But if you're wanting to sort of shape things up or make a big impact, your low hanging fruit is in listening, not speaking so much. So we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, as we've heard it said. And so when you can take the time to really listen to your employees, the speaking also needs to come, right? Because you're going to respond and, share back. But think about an employee survey, for example. That's a listening exercise. So what do you think happens if you run an employee survey and everybody gives you their feedback and then they never hear anything else about it, right? Then it's like, why did I spend my 10 minutes filling in that survey? Because no one's going to listen.
And
So,
they don't care.
and they don't care, right? That's the inference, right? Because I didn't hear anything back, they don't care. But if you develop a listening strategy, either sort of corporate or even amongst individual teams, to say, ask for feedback, listen carefully, and then you close the loop. Thank you for giving me your feedback. I heard you. Here's what you said. Here's what I'm going to do about it. Or here's what I can do about it. Or here's what we're going to do about it. That's your low hanging fruit. So having a solid listening strategy, whether it's through Great Place to Work survey or another survey or another, focus groups or whatever, I think once people see it's not the listening or the asking, it's what you do after is important, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Because that gives people a little bit of control over their environment as well, right? Because they can give you
Yes.
feedback and you do something with it, and
Yeah.
very, very
And I think I'll say this too. Sometimes we're afraid to listen because we're afraid of what we might hear, right?
Mhm.
So one of the pushbacks we sometimes get, I don't want to ask employees what they want because what if we can't do it? Well, if you can't do it, you can't do it. At least you've heard it. At least you've heard the feedback. So asking is not a promise that you will do everything that employees are asking for, not by a long shot, but it can sometimes open your eyes to areas where communication needs to be strengthened. So I'll give you an example. With our survey, there's the 60 questions that we ask, but then there's two open-ended questions. Basically, what makes this a great place to work and what would make it even better? And sometimes employees write things in there, and when the employer reads it, they're like, well, we have that, we have that, we have that, we have that. I wish we had a fitness benefit. Oh, well, we do, right? So it actually opens your eye to areas of misunderstanding and areas where you need to strengthen your own communication. So, for example, in our most recent survey, 20% of you said you would like a fitness benefit. Well, good news, we already have that. Here's how you access it, right? So I like that often comes up in almost every situation. People are giving feedback, which actually just shows that they don't fully understand what's available to them already, you know?
Absolutely. To add to that too, I would say that if employees are asking for things that you cannot do, it's a really good opportunity to just have that conversation and explain why. We would love to give you all 20% raises. Unfortunately, the company will not be open by the end of next month if we were to do that. Of course, we're going to have the conversation that way, but it creates a dialogue as well. It can help grow your people a little bit by helping them understand a bit more some of the things that are there. And yeah, that can certainly help to build trust, right? Saying no, and this is why I'm saying no, and I'm going to explain it to you, is another way of building trust, right?
Right.
It's not all about building trust, it's not about doing everything that people want. It is about working together towards creating a better future, right?
Yeah, and not just about the messages that are easy to deliver, but also the messages that are harder to deliver.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of us avoid having those conversations because we think it's going to be a tough conversation, right? So,
Yeah. That not having it often leads to bigger problems, but that is something we'll discuss in another session. So I want to talk about sustainability just a little bit. So we've talked about culture and trust and the impact on performance, but let's talk a little bit about how that impacts sustainability.
so Mel, you and I are both in front of clients every day, and the number one message we're hearing, the number one concern, what's keeping CEOs up at night? The rapid pace of change. So how are we to survive? How are we to keep our culture intact when tomorrow's different than today and the next day is going to be even more different? So this is overwhelmingly the message that we're hearing. How do we get our people ready for this change? How do we get them to change more quickly, and so on? And so the good news is building trust is how you get those people, how you get your people to change more quickly. So think about AI transformation, for instance. Are you communicating a clear vision for how your organization will use AI? Are you communicating honestly about how this might impact things like job security? Are you developing your people so that they can keep their skill set up to date with what's going to be needed next year or 5 years from now? Right? There's so many pieces tied up in this sort of rapid pace of change that I think building trust is actually the answer to most of them. Because number one, when your employees trust you, they're going to believe what you tell them. If they don't trust you, they're not going to believe what you tell them anyway. so, so it's important that you establish that credibility with your employees first now, right? And what happens is you can end up with this, we call it a reservoir of trust. So let's say you've had a really great year, everything has gone great. You showed up, you were transparent, you celebrated people, you thanked them, and everyone's feeling good. And then there's a pandemic or whatever, downturn in the market, whatever shift. You've got this little reservoir of trust that's going to sustain you while you're not so sure about what's going on. And so I think that my couple of points here is building trust is the best antidote to uncertainty in the market, number one. And number two, when you build enough trust, even if you make a slip or if things are under your control, that can sustain you for a bit through that. So,
Yeah, makes sense. It feels like we need a lot more trust everywhere in the world right now.
yeah.
What? Yeah. What? Thinking about the employee point of view as well. Um, what do you hear most often? What do employees say creates a great workplace, right? We have our perspective at Great Place to Work of what creates a great workplace.
Mhm.
What do you see in the employee feedback?
So what I love about Great Place to Work, and probably why I've been here for more than 15 years, is our perspective is based on real human beings that we talk to. So some of you have heard me kind of share our origin story, which is kind of nice. We were founded 30 years ago by a labor reporter who saw the worst workplaces in America, the
Mhm.
worst. And so he had this great idea that he was going to write a book about the worst workplaces in America. And they said, no, don't write that book. Definitely don't write that book. You know, we don't have lawyers, all that stuff, but why don't you flip it around? And so he began this organic research project where he just spoke with employees about, do you like your job? Do you like your employer? Why? And that's how our model was founded. Is it's employees' words that's our model is based on. Trust was what came up the most often. Credibility, integrity, respect, caring, all those words that you see in the Great Place to Work survey is what employees actually said were the defining elements of their Great Place to Work 30 years ago. So I for one, find that pretty inspiring. Now we have our open-ended employee comments that also validate our model every single day. So the question, if you could name one thing, what is unique or unusual that makes this a great place to work? Those are the same words that come up, right? So this is a universal language we're speaking. And so I think sometimes people might think it's more complicated than it is. It's not, right? It's just, like I say, about human relationships. So,
Yeah, I find what's really interesting is when we look at data across industries, even across geographies, often we see some of the same trends over time keep coming up everywhere
yeah,
because humans are humans, right?
yes.
And there's things that drive all of us. I
Yeah,
want to take a
humans are humans, and trust seems to be this universal defining element that makes us feel good. It makes us perform at our best. It makes us, feel comfortable to give freely, right? When we feel we can trust our leaders. So,
makes us feel safe, right?
yeah.
I want to take a moment just to answer a few questions in the Q&A. I do realize we only have a few minutes left. I'm not going to answer them all, but I am going to go with the ones that I think might apply to most people here. So we have this question where someone asks, what if senior leadership does not want to give up too much information or be too transparent? How can we work around this as people managers? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
So I have a couple thoughts on that.
go ahead.
And I think the question around senior leadership not wanting to give up too much information, the business reality is senior leadership cannot always be fully transparent. If they're laying off 10% of the population next week, they can't be transparent about that. So, what I would encourage senior leaders to do is to look at the data, right? So, let's say you're in the mid tier, right? So, when you have data that shows more transparency equals more trust, equals more discretionary effort, is equals more money, people understand that. So, I think number one, assuming that senior leaders sometimes they can't be transparent, and sometimes maybe they don't understand why transparency is so important, and having that two-way dialogue with your leader about, my team is asking me this, and I really think that if we could give them this information, that would put a lot of, would put the noise out of the way so people can get back to work. So uncertainty creates a lot of distraction in the workplace. And I think leaders at all levels need to understand that when people are second guessing or worried or what, they're actually not working that hard either,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And we will have a webinar on the topic of speaking or sharing information. So that one, I don't know the order, but in the next few months. So do join that one if this is something you are struggling with. And to your great answer, Allison, I would add one more thing is as middle managers, it's a difficult place to be sometimes. And so focusing on what we can control sometimes, what information can I share and how can I push the feedback back up, like you said, Allison, to signify that people want this. We do have a question around what do you see as the biggest opportunity to improve the employee experience in 2026? And so I'm going to take this one if you want,
Okay.
because you've been talking a lot, certainly. Um, my perspective on this, it is the whole trust journey. It'll be different for different organizations, right? So building trust, whatever that means for your organization, will be the biggest one. And I expect that trust is going to become more and more important as we go through all the changes that we're going through, and it's a little bit harder to trust what we're seeing online with AI and all these things. So having high trust in the workplace is going to be really important. So whatever you can do in your organization based on your leadership team, your current employee experience to continue to build trust, that's the biggest opportunity, really. Um, if senior leaders do build trust and then have to announce layoffs, doesn't that impact the organization as trust is now broken? Employees feel betrayed. Talk about that.
So we have seen this more than many times in
Yeah.
our results. So I'll share a little anecdote of an organization that was very committed to their trust building journey. And they were surveying with us every year for like a decade or more. And one year they got the word from above that they had to reduce 10% of their staff. And that announcement came during the survey, or it was just before they were due to
Mm,
launch their survey. And they're like, oh no, what are we going to do? Should we cancel the survey? The layoffs were going to happen during the survey period. And they said, you know what? No, listening is not just about hearing what we want to hear. It's also about supporting employees when the message is tough. So they went ahead with the survey. Their results did dip a bit. It dipped about 4% because the layoffs happened in the middle and it created some fear and anxiety. But guess what happened? The next year, they rebounded 8% because of how they handled that situation. So, layoffs are a business reality. Most people realize that. But it was the way they handled it that was actually a trust building act, even though there was a little bit of uncertainty in the beginning. So we always say the best time to survey is right now. Don't wait till your circumstances are ideal before running a survey. What you want to do is establish a baseline and then build over time.
Absolutely. That is wonderful, wonderful guidance, Allison, because yeah, we want to listen to people not just at the best of times, but also
Yeah.
at the time. And I've had the same experience that you earlier this week talking with an organization who had done some layoffs recently, some significant layoffs in the past few years. And the trust is still very, very high because of how it was handled, because of the care they show to the people who are being exited and to the people who are staying and about how they handled all of this. Wonderful. We are out of time. So there's a few more questions in the chat. You can always connect with Great Place to Work directly. We'll be happy to chat about some of these things with you. But really today we've covered a lot of ground explaining the Great Place to Work effect, and this is just the beginning, right? We have some resources to share on the Great Place to Work effect if you want to look at that. But also we're going to be putting up the link in a moment to our webinar series because this was the introduction. And over the next 10, 11 months, I'm not sure if we're doing one in the summer, we will be going deep into leadership behaviors that help to build trust and that have that great place to work effect. So we're going to pick one behavior per month and we're really going to go deep into that. So do join us for that, for those webinars. And we look forward to being there with you, to hearing from our Great Place to Work clients who will be joining us in these webinars to share their experience. And well, that's it, I guess. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Sorry we took a couple extra minutes of your day. Hopefully it was worth your time. And yeah, thank you, Allison, for sharing a lot of really great insights.
Thanks, Mel. It was great chatting, and thanks to our audience. Hope to see you soon.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye bye.